everyone. This is Neil Mitchell from FTC Team 14481 Don't Blink, and today we're joined by Vikram and Rishi. And Arav is joining soon too, but I think he's just a little late. Today we're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts for scoring in Into the Deep. Today's discussion will be a lot more discussion-like and less presentation-y, and we're just going to be talking a lot more about what you guys think and what is the primary strategy for this game. So let's get right into it. I'm just going to start off by asking you guys some questions. So, in terms of the autonomous period, what do you guys think is the meta or the best possible way to score?
Um, so it's definitely important to like get and score whatever is out in the open, right? Because that is the least random section of the entire field.
Yeah,
Um,
especially for rookies, right?
yeah, exactly. It's like it's the most standard part of every field setup, and it's like in the start, just don't go into the submersible to try and pick up, especially in auto, right? Just finish off whatever is on the three spikes, and then I would say that if you have any a choice between parking and getting one more scoring one more sample or specimen, it's better to just score one more sample or specimen because that's worth more points and it gets counted again in teleop.
Wait, so you're
Yeah,
saying it's better to score one more sampler specimen than doing
To
your
park,
like
yes.
oh the
yeah,
Because
park. Oh yeah,
that makes
100%.
sense. Yeah, because then you get more points from that one
and
thing.
it
Mm-hmm.
gets counted twice as well, so it's much better that way.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like for rookies this year, like going for the samples are probably easier, just because like there's less that you have to do. Human player doesn't have to really like participate during auto. Then it just like makes it easier overall.
Yeah, I think
To-
it took us a bit, but definitely like we the sample auto was a lot simpler for us than the 4+0 or the specimen side auto, which a lot of teams are working towards. So I think if you're a rookie team, doing that is definitely the first move you should take. I know lots of rookie teams right now are mostly just finishing their robot and starting to get to their auto. So things I would recommend for that are um, having localization built into your robot. So that can come from multiple different um, techniques. So that could be like camera localization with April tags or odometry, which is the more common way, or maybe using a spark plug sensor. So we'll leave links to that in our Discord server and on this video, but definitely look into that to optimize your auto localization and point scoring. Um, Now, Arav, welcome to the stream.
Hey,
What do you think about auto? What do you think is the most important thing, and how do you think it will progress throughout the season? What do you think is going to be the meta later
I
on?
think obviously you want the most points as possible, so it's most probably going to be the specimen side auto, whoever can get the most specimen on that side. And then as well as having a good sample auto, because you want your alliance partner to also have a good auto. So if you both have a good auto, then I think it'll be like very beneficial for you both. As for how it's going to progress throughout the season, I think more and more we're going to see more high specimen autos. Like we've already seen a 5+0, I think even a 6+0 now, but I think we might even see a 7+0 or an 8+0, or definitely not an 8, but a 7 maybe in the future.
Yeah. Um, so now what about teleop? Do you guys think it's more beneficial to go for that high chamber, or is it better to go for that high basket, right? Because the basket gives you 8 points, but it might be easier, and a chamber will give you 10 points, but it's a little bit harder. What do you guys think?
I think if you're like pretty consistent with your cycling, then really going for the specimen like doesn't really have many downsides. If you're able to like you get your pieces quickly, get it to the human player, and if they're able to do it like form specimens quickly, then there's really no loss in doing the submersible and or doing the specimen side. And that's like also given that you're like putting your specimens on the bar isn't slow as well. So if you have like a good specimen placing and your cycles are pretty good, then I think going for specimens is definitely the way, especially because of the more points.
Yeah. Um, I think I agree with you for the most part, but somehow I feel like for those rookie teams, it's going to be like a lot better or a lot simpler at least to go for basket, although it's like a higher actually um, task to reach, and it might be a little bit more difficult in the beginning. I think it'll be easier to get that vertical extension and to just like pick something up and drop it in that basket, and there's like not that much precision needed.
Right.
Um,
I think for
yeah,
rookie teams, the hardest part about the specimen is trying to get the blue samples or the red samples into the human or the observation zone for the human player to make specimen
yeah,
and pick that
definitely.
up.
And taking that again after dropping it there is definitely going to be annoying. So I want to see how some rookie teams try to go about that. I know that some teams are thinking about picking it up from the wall. What are your guys' thoughts on that? And Rishi, whatever else you have to add.
I think, I mean, I think that it is really good to try and pick up off the wall because it adds um a like it adds the ability for the human player to correct, which is not possible in other places to place the specimen and pick up. So, for example, if it's in the observation zone, then as soon as the robot enters, then the human player can't put their hands inside that area. Otherwise, it's going to be a penalty. But that's definitely the advantage of picking up off the wall is that it's the clip just falls just outside of that field wall, the outer part of the field wall. So it's much more easy to like slide it across and like help. It makes the driver's job a lot easier. If you do this in autonomous, it makes it a lot more accurate and more consistent because there's a level of like correcting for any error that might come up. So that's definitely, I would say, the better way to go. Much, much better way to go.
I mean, I definitely agree with you for like autonomous because like when you're placing that specimen on the wall, you're able to move it until the robot is actually touching it. So even if they're in the observation zone, you're able to move it around. And I think actually for teleop, it's also kind of beneficial because um, lots of the time when you're picking up from the ground, you'll accidentally knock over a specimen, and that's kind of annoying because then you have to back out. The human player has to fix it, and then you have to go back in, and then sometimes you'll mess it up again. But on the wall, that happens a lot less frequently. So I think that's something to look into. How can you pick it up off the wall and also maybe use that to score back onto the chamber? There is a question in the chat. What is your guys' thoughts on using two preloaded specimen? Oh, okay. This is a really interesting point because lots of teams right now are doing 5+0s, but they're using two preloaded specimens, and it's kind of like, okay, does that really count? Like, isn't the other team going to want to use a specimen? So, what are your guys' thoughts on that? What do you think?
I think it's like it looks good to have like a 1+4 or like a 0 or a 4+0 with like four specimens where they're two preloaded. But I think like a lot of autos this season have been doing like you might see like a 1+3 or like one specimen and three samples. And with how like common that might be, it's like probably easier to just try getting like one specimen from your preload and then giving the other one to your teammate. Also, it's like probably easy enough to build it into your auto where there's an option for both. So like if your teammate isn't taking the specimen, then you can just take theirs. Otherwise, you can just take an extra one from the samples that are available.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think like because it's anyway like a really short distance and there's enough space on the rungs and the chamber side to hang both simultaneously. Like I feel like it's also worth more points. So it's just like much easier for both teams to just start out with a preloaded specimen, and then it's then they can part ways, and then like one will do sample, one will do specimen. But
No, I mean, the question is that like, what do you guys think about like one team using two preload a specimen.
Yeah,
Or
like
one team, yeah.
yeah. I mean, if it's possible, then go ahead, but you should definitely have like a backup option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I think like having two autos or like just having something so you can like quickly make a change in your code so that it will just directly go to a oh, now I have a 4+0 with two specimens rather than like with using the three from the spikes, which might be more or which might be less consistent. So I don't know. Because I've been only using one, but I can get much easier points by using two. So yeah, I think to answer your question, I would just make sure that you have the ability to switch off or have multiple autos to account for your team member or your teammate possibly having an auto as well. Yeah. Um, so what are your guys' thoughts on human playering? So the title of this video is Do's and Don'ts of Scoring in FTC. So today we have our human player, R of Lasher, who can speak to whether they whether first of all they enjoy it, and second of all if like how to avoid penalties and how to get by them when you're actually placing them in match. So if you want to give us a little bit of your insight on that.
Yeah, so in my opinion, like the easiest way to get out of penalties is just look at the robots. You need to be aware of both robots on the field, if they're coming to the human player zone or not. And I know you want to be fast when human playing, like you want to pick up the sample and put a clip on it as quick as possible. But you have to be sure like the robot's out of the way. You don't want to be hastily about it and like accidentally get a penalty because you're trying to go too quick.
Yeah, I think that's definitely good advice. Um, what I've seen, at least from human playing in the power play season, is that you just want to make sure that you're ready at all times with another one ready to go. And something that the head ref in New Jersey suggests always is to sit crisscross applesauce because it's a lot harder to reach into the field and incur penalties. So I think it's just something that's important to practice. And as always, we will always suggest that you guys drive practice, drive practice, drive practice because the most complex robot can do anything, but a simpler robot with lots of drive practice will oftentimes beat that complex robot. Um, you guys can speak a little bit more about that, but let's just check some of the questions in the chat. What about using a yellow preload? Hmm. So what do you guys think about that? Using a yellow preload instead of blue?
I feel like it all depends on your robot alliance. If they are using two blue preload, then you can code something for a yellow preload and get some more high basket points rather than just not using any.
Also, like I mean, this may be obvious, but it's worth saying as well. Like, if you start out closer to the observation zone side, you don't want a yellow preload, right? That you only want a yellow preload if you are starting near the basket side. So
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like if someone doesn't really have an auto as well, it's just like nice to have preload. And also makes it easier when going to telly to just grab it.
Hmm. Something that might be interesting as well is like if your team is getting really good with autos, maybe you can like have another auto where you place the yellow preload instead of a specimen so that if you get to that opportunity, the other team can use your specimen and then maybe have like a 5+0 running with a 0+4. So that would be more points. It might be pretty cool. So there's another question. What do you do about the human? Because each robot has their specific needs. So just to clarify, are you asking what to do, um, like in terms of which human from which team? Is that what you're kind of trying to
I
say?
think I think they're asking like if you're a human player on like one team, because only one human player is allowed. Like, how do you uh, help with the other alliance?
Oh, when both teams are running
Yeah,
specimen.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I don't think both teams should be running specimen. I think the best way to go is definitely for one team to run specimen, one team to run sample. Like it's not like last year where both teams would go to the human player zone if you talk strategy just before the match and you decide that like okay I want our team will run on the specimen side, then like you want your human player to be there. If you decide that okay, we'll run the basket, you guys run specimen, then like you want their human player to be there because like it's more personalized that way, and it'll be much more efficient with. So I don't
Yeah,
think both teams should be running specimen. But if that does happen, then well, then you do have to adapt.
yeah,
Yeah. Also, like in the case that high basket's filled, I think it's like mostly instead of like having both teams trying to place specimens, it should be like one team is feeding for specimens. So like if one team is just placing, the other one can just like give a sample in, and then while the human player will then have a surplus. So it's just makes it way easier for the team that's placing the specimens. And this is like just makes it easier too if one team has a like faster specimen place than the other, then it just makes everything so much better.
yeah. And also, you guys shouldn't forget about the other scoring opportunities. Like, I think feeding is definitely really important. But if the high basket is actually full, you could start filling up the low basket because that's also, is that 4 or 6 points?
I think it's four.
Hmm. Okay. So 4 points is definitely a drop, but I think like if one side is um running their specimen pretty well, I don't think it's a horrible idea to go over to that low basket and maybe start filling that one up. But I think that type of gameplay won't be seen until like a little bit later season, especially from rookies right now. Um, so another thing I wanted to ask you all about was um, the usage of intakes this season and how we're actually going to pick things up from that submersible. Lots of teams right now are um, using claw intakes, but we've seen a good amount of active intakes, and I wanted to see what you guys think, what's necessary, and how would you suggest to use either mechanism? Rishi, you're unmuted.
I think we've seen a lot of it's like divided between claw and active.
Yeah, it really is.
Like you go anywhere and you see it's either claw or there's like no other types of intaking mechanism. But it all depends on like the robot, right? It depends on like, whatever suits the robot and how many motors you have to spare. Let's say you want an active intake, you kind of want to use a motor for that. Um, So if you have like all 8 motors being used somewhere, let's say for hang mechanism or some other mechanism, then you really should go with claw. Um, and claw also with claw you have to be more precise in both autonomous programming and also the drivers have to be much more precise with it. With active intake, you don't really have to do that. But the only thing with active is that you have to make sure that you don't pick out multiple. That tends to happen with active. But it's like you don't have to be as precise anymore.
Yeah, I remember like even when we had the session with Ethan, like he was talking about how having it as an active makes it just so much easier for someone to drive and someone to code because it's like you have such a bigger range of error, um, which would just really helps out, especially if you're a rookie team. But like it could be a little bit harder to design, but if you're able to get it, then it definitely works out well.
Yeah, for sure. I think something that's also really important in terms of active is that you have some way to eject like what you're intaking so that like you're still able to like intake out the front and you can keep on going forward while like your wrong elements are just going out the back. And that will make it so that you're able to like intake things faster. And this is something that's a little bit more complicated, so if you're just getting into building intakes, like I would just keep it simple, but this is something that could be really important and could really help in terms of auto, especially when it cuts to like actually picking up from the submersible and scoring too. There's a question in the chat. What library should I use for auto? Hmm. Vikram, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, when it comes to auto, there's really so many options, especially like now when there's been so many developments within like the community. So I know like if you're talking about pathing, then there's like probably like three or two big main options. So one of those would be Roadrunner, and the other would be Pedro pathing. So both of those, a lot of teams have had like really good success with. So both are like up to preference. I think it's like mainly known that Pedro pathing is like generally faster, and it like sometimes comes with better results. So I think it's like recommended to try Pedro pathing. It might be a little bit harder to tune and get it set up properly, but it's definitely something that you should give a try. And then definitely Roadrunner after that. So there's Roadrunner 1.0, Roadrunner 0.5. Both have been fairly stable, so it's recommended to try either.
I think 0.5 is like deprecated now. But
Yeah.
1.0 is still like easy to use. I would definitely recommend that for like any rookie programmers because it's a lot more easier to tune, a lot more easier to use as well. And there's just so much. It's been around for a while as well, so many people know about it. And like if you need help, right, you can ask, and like a lot of people will definitely respond to Roadrunner questions.
Yeah.
It's been around for like, I mean, point five came out like for I think it was out like in the 8 years ago. It's been out for 8 years, and then 1.0 is like an
Eight
upgrade.
years? Really?
Yeah, 2018, right? Oh, it's
I thought
6 years.
it was Rover Ruckus. Was
Yeah,
that
oh yeah, six
that was
years.
8 years ago? 6 years.
Rover
Okay, that
Ruckus
would
was
be
what,
Yeah,
something.
2018?
6 years ago. But yeah, there's
Yeah, also
definitely more people are like more comfortable with Roadrunner, so it's also much more easier to use. So
yeah, I
definitely.
mean, even like on the same topic, like in the FTC Discord, there's a whole like help channel just related to Roadrunner. So it's definitely easier to get help with that than
They did
something
that
else.
in like this year.
Yeah.
There's another question. Are people still using point 0.5? I know we are, but are other teams using that? Do you guys know? I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely other teams using it. I've talked to like people and they said that like a lot of the teams they know have still been using point 0.5. I think it's mostly legacy teams that are using it because it's just something that like they'll know and it just becomes easier to tune in the end. So yeah.
I think that's something you'll see like really often is that teams like to stick to what they know because when they
Yeah.
switch off to something new, like oftentimes they'll encounter issues. That's something that we've liked to do, and we kind of always make the mistake of like, oh yeah, this thing's so cool, we should try using it. So just like try to remain careful when implementing new things throughout the season because you never know how it's like gonna fail. And because it's something that's completely new to you and it sounds really great on the outside, but you never know until you try it. So I think it's always good to just try things in the off season and make sure that um, you can really get to know something before actually properly using it. Now let's finally get into endgame. There isn't really much to endgame this season, but hanging is something that's really prevalent and something that people really need to get good at. Don't Blink currently cannot hang, so something that we definitely need to work on. But what do you guys think? Do you think it's um, important to hang? What do you think the best way of hanging is? Is there a particular mechanism that makes this task easier? Uh, level one, level two, level three, things like that. What do you guys think?
I think the biggest thing to note is that for level 2 ascent, like you it's really hard to do it like with other lift mechanisms other than slides. I think slides definitely make it the easiest to hang. Um, and I think you just like can't be afraid to like support yourself using the submersible. I think that was clear. That was one of the rules. You can't do it. You can do it horizontally, not vertically. Just like that's very helpful to know when designing a hang.
I think an added challenge this year is the bar of the submersible,
Yeah.
right? Like I know we've faced a little issue with designing it. It's just that you can't really hang as easily as you could in previous seasons because with that bar it means that when you start hanging, you start to tip over, and when you tip, you hit you're still in contact with the floor or even the bar for that matter, and that just I mean then your hang doesn't count. So like you know, yeah, and on top of that, if you are able to cycle much faster, right, then be able to hang, then definitely just stick with cycling because it's like 15 points, right, to hang. But in that time, if you can get maybe two samples in the high basket and then park, right, I think that's worth more. So it's definitely better to. It's also easier to do that.
Yeah. One thing that's really nice is that they like have been making lots of team updates or not team updates. What are they called? Maybe they are called team updates, but they're like giving us lots of changes to the game manual this season. And like for example, now you're able to go for the second rung, and it will count as a first or a second level ascent, which is for the teams that don't know, 15 points, and it means that you're off the ground and you're technically hung on the first rung, but they've made it so now if you're hanging on the second rung and you're just touching the first rung, that counts as a second level ascent. Before in the season, you had to actually go to the first rung and then the second. So I think it's a really big factor to this game, and it's going to be a lot of points later on. So I think um, teams really need to just work on this. DR4B makes hang a little bit difficult, but I think we can definitely figure it out, and there are just some things that you guys need to test. So keep an open mind when creating a hang and when creating your other mechanisms too. Um, okay, so I think that's pretty much it for Into the Deep. Is there anything you guys want to bring up as some closing thoughts?
Just one last thing. If you are to park, it's better. I think it's much easier to just park in the observation zone than
Hmm.
to complete a level one ascent, which in that case you have to like touch the lower rung. I think it's just like easier to just drive into the observation zone. It's the same amount of points.
Yeah, that's a good point. Arav and Vikram, anything else?
No, I don't have anything.
Nope.
Okay, sounds good. And let's just take a quick look at the chat just to make sure that we're not missing anything. Okay, yeah, we're good. All right. Thank you everyone for joining this session of FTC Rookie Rescue with Don't Blink. We will see you next week for more information on the game. Thank you. Bye.